Well, we're ready for another week. Today's Tuesday, so I'm sorry about getting this late to you all in Poetic Books Week 3. We're ready to go. One of the things you'll be tackling is what is referred to as the problem of evil. It's also called the problem of suffering. It's in your discussion forums for this week. You're going to really need to think through this issue. It's a hard issue that people have wrestled with for decades and centuries. And Ravi Zacharias has said that any worldview that wants to tell us things about the world has to account for why there is evil and suffering in the world. It's a question that any worldview must answer. And of course, we're in the last part of the book of Job, where the whole thing culminates with God's speech, and he fires off a series of questions to Job, and Job finds that he's unable even to address God, as it'll say in your course readings. But we want to think through the issue. Why does God permit? Why does God allow evil and suffering? Usually, he's not the one inflicting suffering directly, although sometimes we do see in the Bible that God is inflicting punishments on people directly. And certainly God is never doing evil because he is good, so he cannot do evil. But let's try to think through then why he's allowing it. I just want to give you guys some maybe guiding principles just to think through, just to kind of frame the issue for you. So with the problem of evil, there are two ways to answer the problem of evil, primary ways. One is called a defense, and the other is called a theodicy. A defense seeks to show how it's possible that God and evil exist together. So if you're providing a defense, you're not saying, okay, I know what the reason God has for allowing evil and suffering in the world. You're not saying that you know why. You're just saying this is how it works out, that God allows for evil and suffering. I don't know what it is, but this is how it can work out and make it the case that it's possible. A theodicy actually purports to show the reason God allows evil. It agrees with the defense. The theodicy says, okay, yep, it's true that God and evil are compatible, but it goes further than that and says that this is the reason why God allows evil. So here's some effective approaches when you're dealing with people. First, you're going to want to realize that people are human. They don't want to hear about, your sterile academic reasoning when they're going through something. They want you to be there for them. There's going to be a time for that academic reasoning, and that's why we have it. That's why we have to do it. We want to be prepared to give an answer, but we don't want to shove it down people's throats immediately either, or be too quick to judge. But on the defense side, what is popular is what's known as the free will defense. Evil exists in part because of human sin. Now, you got to notice there's some delineations here. We're not saying, for instance, that evil that exists is always the result of that same person's sin. So let's say that there's a mugger and he goes and he beats up an old lady and takes her purse. Is it the old lady's sin that is the result that's forming the cause for that evil? Not necessarily, and probably not. It's really the mugger's sin. He is sinning, and it has consequences that affect other people. You can look at other major issues like abortion. If abortion is murder, the babies aren't the ones sinning. They're the ones that are experiencing the consequences, not all of them, but the immediate consequences of being aborted for someone else's sin. So there's that issue as well. So free will defense, evil exists in part because of human sin. God has given us a choice, he's given us free will, and humans have abused that free will to bring harm to themselves and to others. That only forms part of the question, though, because you have suffering that's not brought about by human sin, as far as we know. For instance, a tsunami in Japan a few years back, or let's say there's a little island that has a tidal wave and everybody's wiped out. It could be because of everyone's sin. It might not be. We don't get that insight from God. We don't have that blank check to say, yep, all those instances are done as punishment for sins. Some of them might just be natural suffering. So the free will defense helps here. It just doesn't go all the way. What about a greater good theodicy? The greater good theodicy from a Christian standpoint will say that all things work together for good, but only to those who love God is that guaranteed. That might sound familiar because it's Romans 8:28 paraphrased. The idea is not that every little thing is good, or that every individual thing will bring about some individual good by itself. What happens is each individual bad thing of evil or suffering will work together with all the other events in the world to bring about a good result for those believers in Christ. Now, how could that be? How could events in the world that are continents away have anything to do with me, a believer in Jesus Christ, in the ultimate, final, eternal state? Well, let me tell you, no one lives to himself and dies to himself. In fact, this whole world is just a whole bunch of series of interconnected facts about what people are doing and where they're going and where they'll be tomorrow. And if my parents had died when I was young, I would do X, Y, and Z. If my parents outlive me, then they will do X, Y, and Z. And there's just so many different counterfactuals, we call them, that we can really take the Bible at its word that the reason God is allowing evil is because He is allowing us to have free will, and He allows that suffering in the world because of how the world will turn out for those two reasons, but also He wants to complete the redemption story, and that's the Christian answer. We don't want to say such trite things such as, when a child dies, God just needed that child more than we realized, or more than, God needed that child more than we did. Instead, what we want to say is God is working out the redemption story, and He's doing it on the stage of the earth, with all of us as true players who have true choices to make every day. And the choices that we make are going to have eternal consequences when it comes to what we do with God the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. So we want to point people to the majesty of God and to what He's trying to do, the salvation story. That's the true answer to the problem of evil. So it's just something I want you guys to think about as you go throughout this week.